He looked at the woman standing in the lobby of the Meridian Grand Hotel and saw a problem. He saw natural hair, he saw brown skin, he saw a wool coat that wasn't designer, luggage that wasn't monogrammed, and a face that didn't match the kind of face he was used to seeing on the 14th floor. What Derek Faulkner didn't see was the Canadian Forces decoration on her service record. The 2 tours in Mali and Latvia, the classified briefings she had sat in on with NATO commanders in Brussels, the fact that he was about to make the worst professional decision of his 51 years on this earth. He thought he was the gatekeeper. He was about to learn he was the door being shut. This is the story of how a hotel manager with a god complex humiliated a retired Brigadier-General of the Canadian Armed Forces in front of a lobby full of witnesses, and the avalanche of consequences that buried him alive. The Meridian Grand sat in the financial district of Toronto, 42 floors of glass and limestone that caught the winter light like a cold flame. It was the kind of hotel where the staff wore fitted blazers with gold piping on the cuffs, where the elevator music was live piano, and where the concierge knew your name before you reached the desk. It was a hotel that prided itself on discretion, on taste, on the quiet architecture of privilege. Josephine Abara-Mensah arrived on a Thursday morning in February, when the city was locked in the grip of one of those grey Ontario winters that pressed down on everything like a lid on a jar. She was 50 years old, compact, and carried herself with the kind of bearing that people often describe without being able to explain. The straightness of her back, the deliberateness of her stride, the way she moved through a space as though she had already assessed every exit. She wore a deep burgundy wool coat, had her hair in tight natural coils that framed a face that showed its age honestly and beautifully, and she was pulling a plain black rolling suitcase behind her. She was in Toronto for 3 days. The Department of National Defence was hosting a symposium on Arctic sovereignty and northern operations, and Josephine, Brigadier-General Josephine Abara-Mensah, retired, the first black woman to command a Canadian Army brigade, had been invited to keynote. The symposium was being held, as a matter of some irony that would become apparent shortly, on the 14th floor of the Meridian Grand. She had a reservation. She had confirmed it twice. She arrived at 9:47 in the morning, 40 minutes before check-in time, expecting to leave her luggage, collect her key, and find a quiet corner to review her notes before the afternoon session. Derek Faulkner was the general manager of the Meridian Grand. He was 44, lean, in the way of a man who runs not for health but for ego, and had spent the better part of 2 decades working his way up from front desk to the position he now occupied with the intensity of a man who confused a title with an identity. He had a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes, and the particular brand of confidence that comes not from competence but from never having been meaningfully challenged. He was crossing the lobby when Josephine walked through the front doors. One of the junior concierge staff, a young man named Theo, moved immediately toward the entrance to assist. Faulkner raised a hand, stopped him. He had seen Josephine come through the door, and something in his brain, in that invisible and shameful architecture of bias that men like Faulkner never examine, had flagged her. He went himself. Josephine approached the front desk. There was no one behind it. Theo was still standing 15 feet away, frozen by Faulkner's gesture, watching with the anxious expression of someone who already sensed what was coming. Faulkner intercepted her before she reached the desk. "Good morning," he said. His tone was the verbal equivalent of a hand on a door. "Are you here for the conference?" Josephine looked at him. She recognized the tone immediately. She had heard it in barracks, in boardrooms, in airports, in the parking lots of buildings she commanded. The tone that asked without asking, "Are you in the right place?" "I'm checking in," Josephine said. Faulkner's smile didn't waver. "Of course, and you have a reservation?" "I do." "Under what name?" "Abara-Mensah." He made a show of looking down at the tablet in his hand, scrolling with one finger. He looked up. "I'm not seeing it." "Try Josephine Abara-Mensah, or it may be under the DND block booking, Department of National Defence." He scrolled again. The performance was too slow, too deliberate. "I'm sorry, I'm really not seeing anything here." "Are you certain you booked with us directly, or could it have been a third-party site? Sometimes those reservations—" "I confirmed the reservation by phone 4 days ago," Josephine said. Her voice was even. "I have the confirmation number. Would that help?" She reached into her coat pocket and produced her phone, opening her email. She held the screen toward him. He glanced at it without taking the phone. "I'll have to look into this," Faulkner said. He had shifted slightly, positioning his body between her and the front desk. It was a subtle move, the kind that happens below the level of conscious decision-making, but it was unmistakable. "Could I ask what brings you to the hotel today? Are you attending an event?" I'm a guest, checking in. Right, and we'll get that sorted. But our standard check-in time is 10:30, so even if we do locate your reservation, you'd be waiting regardless. He smiled again, warmer this time, as though he was doing her a favor. There's a lovely cafe 2 blocks east. You're welcome to. I would like to speak to someone at the front desk, Josephine said. No edge in her voice, no heat, just precision. I am the general manager, Faulkner said, and now there was something underneath his pleasantness, a firmness, a decision having been made. I am who you speak to. He stepped toward her then, a shift in posture that was meant to close something down. I want to be transparent with you. We've had some issues with reservation fraud recently, particularly with third-party bookings and conference blocks. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I do need to verify a few things before I can proceed. If you'd like to take a seat in the lobby. Josephine did not take a seat in the lobby. She stood very still. Anyone who had served under her, anyone who had sat across from her in a command tent or a briefing room, would have recognized that stillness. It was not the stillness of submission. It was the stillness of a person choosing very deliberately not to deploy the weapons available to her. What specifically, Josephine said, do you need to verify? I'd just like to see some government-issued ID before I pull up the file. She opened her wallet. She placed her Ontario driver's license on the desk. He looked at it. He placed it back without acknowledgement. And the reservation confirmation, you said you had it. She showed him the phone again. He looked at the screen for 3 seconds, then looked away. The issue, he said, is that the D&D block may not have been finalized on our end. That's an administrative matter between the conference organizers and our events team, and unfortunately I can't simply override. Then call the events team. Faulkner's jaw tightened. The lobby was not empty. A businessman near the elevator was no longer looking at his phone. A family near the entrance had slowed their conversation. Theo, still standing near the door, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Our events team doesn't come in until 10, Faulkner said. It's 9:50. 10 o'clock. Josephine looked at him for a moment, just looked at him. Then she said quietly, You are making a mistake, mister. She glanced at his lapel pin. Faulkner, I would encourage you to check the D&D block carefully, because my name is on it, and if you are suggesting that I am here without a legitimate reservation, I need you to say that clearly and give me your reasons in writing, because that is a serious allegation. Faulkner blinked. The word writing seemed to do something to him. But he had already committed. He had an audience now, even if a small one, and men like Derek Faulkner would rather be consistently wrong than publicly seen to retreat. I'm not making an allegation, he said. I'm following standard protocol for unverified reservations. I'd ask you to be patient. I have been patient, Josephine said, for 12 minutes. Ma'am. Don't, she said, one word, flat, final. Faulkner reached for his radio to call the duty manager. Before he raised it to his mouth, the elevator doors at the far end of the lobby opened, and a man in his late 60s walked out, silver-haired, wearing a D&D lanyard over a pressed dress shirt. His name was Lieutenant General Raymond Beauchirard, also retired, the former Deputy Chief of the Defense Staff and the symposium's chair. He saw Josephine from 20 meters away. His face broke into a genuine smile. He walked directly toward her, hand extended. Joe, you made it. I was going to call. He clasped her hand in both of his. The room's set, your notes have been printed. They've got your slides loaded already. He turned, registering Faulkner with the brief, calibrated attention of a man who had spent 40 years assessing people quickly. Is there a problem? Mr. Faulkner, Josephine said, is having some difficulty locating my reservation. Beauchirard looked at Faulkner. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, the way weather changes before anyone feels the drop in temperature. Her name, he said pleasantly, is Brigadier-General Josephine Abara-Mensah. Retired. She is our keynote speaker this weekend, and she is listed on the master block under the conference organizer's name, Carrington Events, as the primary VIP accommodation. A pause. Shall I give you the confirmation code, or would you like to call Carrington directly? Faulkner's face had gone a particular shade that clashed badly with the gold piping on his blazer. I'll pull it up right now, he said. He pulled it up right now. There it was. Josephine Abara-Mensah, room 1402, VIP designation, welcome amenity flagged, complimentary late checkout approved, had been in the system since November. The check-in took 4 minutes. Faulkner completed it in the manner of a man doing a task while internally trying to locate the escape hatch. He offered an upgrade. Josephine declined. He offered to have her luggage sent up immediately. She thanked him without warmth. She took her keycard, said something brief and warm to Beauchamp Girard about seeing him at the afternoon session, and walked to the elevator. She did not look back. But Theo did. The young concierge watched Faulkner standing at the desk for a moment after the elevator closed, staring at the screen. Theo went to the staff bathroom, sat in a stall, and typed what he had witnessed into a note on his phone. He wasn't sure yet what he was going to do with it. He figured he'd know soon. Josephine delivered her keynote that afternoon to a room of 200 defense analysts, academics, senior officers, and government officials. She spoke for 50 minutes without notes, about Canada's strategic obligations in the Arctic, about the lessons of cold weather operations, about what it meant to build institutions that outlast the people who run them. She received a standing ovation that lasted long enough for it to be genuinely awkward for the people who didn't know where to put their hands. She did not mention the lobby. But in the lobby, things were already in motion. Theo had texted a friend who worked at another downtown hotel, a woman named Priya who had her own collection of stories about Faulkner's behavior toward guests who didn't fit his unspoken profile. Priya had shared it in a group chat of hospitality workers. Someone in that group chat had posted it, anonymized, on a local Reddit thread about downtown Toronto service industry experiences. 3 hours later, 2 people had already commented, saying they had witnessed something similar at the Meridian Grand, involving a black woman being stopped at the desk, while white guests behind her were waved through. By 10 o'clock that night, someone had identified the hotel by the lobby decor visible in a short video Theo had quietly recorded on his phone. Just the interaction at the desk, audio only, no faces, and posted it without context. The audio clip was 48 seconds, it was enough. Faulkner's voice asking for ID, the specific phrase reservation fraud, the word verify used 3 times in 90 seconds to one person. The clip had 4,000 shares before midnight. Josephine's officer received a call at 7:15 the next morning from a journalist at the Toronto Star who had already confirmed the basic facts and wanted comment. Josephine's assistant called Josephine, who was in her hotel room eating a bowl of oatmeal she had ordered from room service, and informed her of the situation. Josephine asked for a few minutes. She sat at the small desk by the window and looked out at the grey city for a moment, at the lake barely visible in the winter distance, at the CN Tower catching no light because there was no light to catch. Then she called her lawyer. His name was Gordon Osiansa, a Queen's Counsel with 30 years of civil litigation experience, and he had represented Josephine once before in a matter involving a contractor dispute on a property she owned in Ottawa. He picked up on the second. She told him what had happened. He was quiet for a moment. Did anyone record it? He asked. She told him what she knew about Theo's audio. Another pause. Don't say anything public yet, I'll call you in an hour. She went back to her oatmeal. Gordon Osiansa did not need an hour. By 8:30 he had listened to the audio twice, reviewed Ontario's Human Rights Code provisions on discrimination in services, and put in a call to a contact at the Canadian Human Rights Commission. By 9 o'clock, he had sent a formal letter of intent to the Meridian Grand's parent company, a Vancouver-based hospitality group with 18 properties across the country, advising them that his client intended to file a human rights complaint under the Ontario Human Rights Code, specifically citing discrimination on the grounds of race and colour in the provision of accommodation services. The parent company received that letter at 9:14 a.m. By 9:22, Faulkner's phone rang. It was the VP of operations for the hotel group, a man who had been in the industry for 30 years and had never, in 30 years, wanted to have this particular phone call. Faulkner, to his credit, did not try to pretend nothing had happened. To his discredit, his first instinct was to explain. He said words like protocol and standard practice and reservation irregularities. He said the guest had been impatient. He said the interaction had been professional. The VP of operations said 4 words, "I heard the recording." What followed in the hospitality industry happens quickly when a parent company decides it needs to contain something. A notice of suspension was issued to Faulkner by noon, pending a formal workplace investigation. The hotel's corporate communications team put out a statement by 1 o'clock, careful, measured, neither confirming specific allegations nor denying them, which in the world of public relations means exactly what you think it means. The Meridian Grand social media accounts went quiet. By that evening, Faulkner's name was searchable in connection with 2 words he would spend the rest of his professional life trying to shake loose. The investigation took 6 weeks. The hotel group brought in an external HR firm. They interviewed Theo. They interviewed 3 other staff members who had worked under Faulkner. They reviewed incident logs from the past 2 years, which turned out to contain 4 previous complaints from guests. 2 black, 1 South Asian, 1 indigenous, all involving interactions at the front desk during Faulkner's shifts, all involving some version of the same pattern. Requests for additional ID, suggestions that reservations were unverified, language about standard protocol. None of those complaints had gone anywhere at the time. The hotel had its own ways of making things quiet. They were no longer quiet. The human rights complaint was filed formally in March. Gordon Osianza was thorough. The filing cited the audio recording, the testimony of 2 witnesses, the pattern of documented complaints, and a statistical analysis of complaint demographics during Faulkner's tenure that a data analyst friend of Josephine's had put together in a single weekend, because she was that kind of person and she was angry. Faulkner's employment was terminated in April. The letter cited a breach of the company's equity, diversity and inclusion policy, conduct unbecoming a senior manager, and a pattern of behavior inconsistent with the company's values. His union, the Hospitality Workers Union local he had belonged to for 2 decades, reviewed the case file and declined to pursue a grievance on his behalf. He found out by email. The civil settlement was reached in July, without going to a full tribunal. The terms were confidential, but the Meridian Grand's parent company additionally committed to a set of public-facing obligations: mandatory anti-bias training across all 18 properties, a new reservation verification policy that required documented reason for any secondary ID request, and an annual equity audit of guest complaint data to be reviewed by an independent panel that included community representatives. Gordon Osianza called Josephine when the settlement agreement was signed. She was at her cottage north of Kingston, sitting on the dock in the late summer sun. "It's done," he said. "Good," she said. There was a pause. "What are you going to do with your portion?" he asked. "I haven't decided everything yet," she said, "but the first part is going to a scholarship for hospitality management students from underrepresented communities. I want people in those lobbies who understand what it feels like to be the ones standing in front of the desk." Gordon was quiet for a moment. "That's good, Joe." It's practical," she said. "Change the room, not just the wallpaper." Faulkner, by that point, had applied to 4 hotel management positions in Ontario and been turned down by all 4. His name appeared in the results within seconds of a Google search attached to articles in The Star, in the Globe and Mail, in a widely circulated piece in a hospitality industry trade publication. He had moved out of the house he had shared with his partner, who had said simply that she couldn't be in a relationship with someone who thought what he had done was a protocol issue. He was living in a sublet in Mississauga, refreshing his email. The industry he had spent 20 years climbing had a long memory for the managers who cost properties money, reputational damage, and regulatory scrutiny. He was not unemployable, perhaps, but he was expensive in ways that had nothing to do with salary. On a Tuesday morning in October, Josephine Abara-Mensah stood at a podium in a small function room at Ryerson, now Toronto Metropolitan University, scholarship recipients, and watched hospitality management students, every one of them from a community underrepresented in hotel leadership, shake hands, take their certificates, and smile in the way of people who understand that a door has been opened for them that was not open before. She didn't make a speech about what had happened in February. She didn't need to. The students in that room didn't need a villain's story to understand why this scholarship existed. They had their own versions. They had stood in their own lobbies. She said only this, that the standard you walk past is the standard you accept, and that the world doesn't change by loudly defeating the people who hold it back. It changes by quietly, persistently, placing the right people in the right rooms and watching what they build. Then she thanked the audience, stepped down from the podium, and went to talk to the students. Derek Faulkner thought he was deciding who belonged in that hotel. He was wrong. He was never the one with the power to make that decision. He just hadn't figured that out yet. And when Josephine Abara-Mensah stood in that lobby, calm, documented, patient, she wasn't waiting for him to give her anything. She was giving him the opportunity to do the right thing. He chose differently, and that choice, as choices tend to do, followed him everywhere he went after. If this story sat with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe that dignity doesn't belong only to the people with the right credentials or the right connections, that it belongs to everyone standing in that lobby, then you already understand what this channel is about. Subscribe, leave a comment below, and we'll see you in the next one. I keep thinking about the moment Derek Faulkner opened that wallet and saw the confirmation number that had been sitting in his own system since November. 11 weeks. It was there the whole time. And I think about what it took for him to get to that moment, not the 48 seconds of audio, not the lawyer's letter, not the VP's phone call, but the 12 minutes before any of that, when a woman stood at a desk and was patient with a man who had decided, before she said a single word, that she didn't belong. What strikes me most about Josephine isn't that she was a brigadier general, it's that she already knew how this worked. She'd been in that lobby before, metaphorically speaking, more times than anyone should have to be, and she still showed up with her documentation, her composure, and her confirmation number. That's not naivety. That's a kind of moral endurance that I find genuinely hard to describe. The decision to remain decent when someone is treating you as less than that. Not because you have to, but because you've decided that your conduct is yours to control, regardless of what the person across from you is doing with theirs. There's something I've come to believe about the way consequences work, and it has nothing mystical about it. When you build a version of yourself around the power to exclude people, you have to keep finding people to exclude in order to feel that power. You need the lobby, you need the desk, you need the moment of assessment, and the longer you do it, the more your sense of who you are becomes tied to that moment, to being the one who decides. Faulkner didn't just make a bad call one February morning. He'd been making that call for years. The call was already made before Josephine walked through the door. And that's the part that gets me, because when the consequences came, and they came completely, methodically, without drama, they weren't punishment in any punitive sense. They were just the natural conclusion of a pattern he'd been building for a long time. The pattern finished itself. I think about Theo too, a young man in a hotel lobby who saw something wrong and wrote it down on his phone because he didn't know what else to do. That kind of clear-eyed honesty, recognizing what you're seeing and refusing to look away from it, is its own form of intelligence. Not credentials or rank, just the willingness to be accurate about what's in front of you even when it's uncomfortable. And then there's what Josephine did with the settlement. She could have kept it. She earned it. Instead, she put it into a scholarship, into the next generation of people standing behind those desks rather than in front of them. That's the kind of thinking that outlasts a single incident. That's someone who understands that real change isn't about winning the argument in the lobby. It's about making sure the lobby looks different in 10 years. I don't always know what to do with stories like this one, but I know what I take from it. Be the person who writes it down. Be the person who stays calm. And when you get the chance to build something, build it so that someone who comes after you doesn't have to fight the same battle just to check in.